what I'll do now is give you another set of analysis on the impact of Prashant Kishor, because this, as I said, is really, you could call him the X factor, you could call him the joker in the pack, the one big unknown which will determine what happens on the 14th. Now, this data is by Amitabh Tiwari, who also comes from Bihar, knows more than a thing or two about his own home state, and therefore is trying to look at what's happening in Bihar from that lens. So let's take a look at the data. This is compiled by Amitabh Tiwari. This is just the base figure, right? If you adjust for actuals, it's 42% for NDA, 39% for the Gathbandhan. This is how it actually was, but then, as I said earlier, Chirag Paswan was fighting separately. So this is the base figure he starts from, and then he's building out different scenarios. Let's take the first scenario, this by psephologist and analyst Amitabh Tiwari. Now, in scenario 1, he's saying Jan Swaraj gets 10% of the votes. Here, if 5% comes from the Gathbandhan and 5% comes from the others, remember 26% did not vote either for the Gathbandhan or for the NDA. These are the others. He's saying he picks 5%. In this scenario, he's not suggesting PK damaged the NDA. Here again, it's a clear victory. If there's an 8% gap between the Gathbandhan and the NDA, it's game over. It's a sweep, a decisive sweep for the NDA. Let's now come to scenario 2. In scenario 2, Amitabh Tiwari projects that he's picking up 5% of the vote from the NDA and 5% from the others. So if 5% comes from the NDA, then the Gathbandhan gets to 39% of the vote share, the NDA gets to 37% of the vote share, which means it will be a tight election. The Gathbandhan typically has concentrated votes in Bihar. This scenario would give the Gathbandhan the edge. The Jan Swaraj party at 10% would have some impact on seats, 10% overall pan-state vote share, but not much of an impact on seats across the state. Here, the Gathbandhan goes through if 5% of the votes come from the NDA. Let's now come to scenario 3. Scenario 3 is 10% vote share, 5% coming from the others, and he picks up equally from the Gathbandhan and the NDA. 2.5% are NDA supporters, 2.5% are Gathbandhan supporters, which means he's damaging both. In this scenario, the NDA is at 36%, the Gathbandhan at 36%. In this scenario, again, the NDA, it won't be a landslide decisive victory, but it will be enough for the NDA to win. A 3% vote share gap is typically enough to cross the victory margin, but it won't be the 2010 type of result, which was the historic best of the NDA previously. So these are the three scenarios which has been put together by Amitabh Tiwari, and I want to go across now to Amitabh Tiwari to try and get him to explain, because these are scenario building. Now, you've been traveling the state, Amitabh, this is your Janpad, as it were, and therefore leave the scenarios aside for a moment. Of what you've understood of what's happening on the ground, which of these scenarios is most likely to actually come true? Whose votes is he damaging more, and to what extent? Amitabh.
No, so clearly, since Bihar has a history of around 20% vote share to others, what Prashant Kishor has done is that he has emerged as the CM face of the voters who have been voting for other smaller parties and independents. So I am pretty sure that he is likely to inflict the highest damage to others, which is consolidating the vote of others, sort of a third front, which you can categorize as an anti-NDA or an anti-Mahagathbandhan vote, because they now see an institutional force, a face, they get a face who can take on both the NDA and the Mahagathbandhan. Now there are, if you see where is he getting traction from, clearly youth is one section where he is getting traction from, largely the 18 to 24 or 18 to 30 category youth, and there I see he is fairly getting traction from around 12 to 15% voters. Now that you can say is an opportunity loss for the NDA, for the Mahagathbandhan, because Tejasvi Yadav has emerged also as a choice of the youth, highlighting unemployment as one of the key issues, and in 2020 the youth have backed him largely on a promise of creating jobs of around 10 lakh. But when you see as the social profile of the voters of Jan Swaraj, you see that the highest traction he is getting is also amongst the upper caste, because the upper caste also see an opportunity or hope that they can get a chief minister from their community after 35 years. And this is also one of the reasons precisely that the NDA or the top leadership, which is the Prime Minister and the Home Minister, are not clearly announcing or saying that Nitish could be the CM, because 1/3 of BJP voters largely do not want to see Nitish as CM and comprise of a large section of upper caste, and Jansuraj has put up 92 upper caste and Baniya community candidates. So there is a fear amongst the BJP also that these voters, like in 2020, had veered to the LJP, could veer towards the Jansuraj. So largely upper caste, a section of Muslims and Dalits, and if you see the economic or socio-economic profile, it's largely again the middle class, educated educated middle class, because he is highlighting corruption, and also a section of the poor because he is also raising issues of healthcare.
अरे आप तो इतना बोल रहे हो जैसे सभी वोट
His game is largely predicated on the 83 seats.
You've given so many different communities.
नहीं अभी आ रहे हैं ना. तो essentially क्या है, essentially क्या है कि he is not likely to win this elections, correct? So he is likely to play the role of a spoiler, just like the LJP did in 2020 elections, damaging both the NDA and the Mahagathbandhan. There are 83 seats where the victory margin was less than equal to 5% in 2020. 37 won by NDA and 38 won by Mahagathbandhan, 7 by others. If on these seats he gets 5% plus vote share, he is likely to damage the prospects of either of the parties. So he is likely to play the role of a spoiler in this election. The better Jansuraj does, the closer will be the election. The worse Jansuraj does, the election could also go one-sided.